The man who appears most free is often the most controlled, and the man who chooses control becomes the only one who cannot be ruled. There is a certain kind of silence that exists inside discipline, not the silence of peace, but the silence of denied impulse, a silence where something in you speaks, and something stronger refuses to listen. Most people never enter this space, not fully. They visit it, they touch it briefly, then they retreat, because it feels unnatural, restrictive, almost unnecessary. Modern life has trained us to believe that control should feel comfortable, that structure should feel smooth, that discipline should feel rewarding. But the Greeks did not build their lives around comfort. They built around resistance, because resistance reveals something most people spend their lives avoiding, the true shape of their character. I did not begin this experiment with strength. I began with irritation, because I noticed something I could not ignore. There were moments when I knew exactly what I should do, and still chose something else, not because I lacked knowledge, not because I lacked ability, but because something smaller, something quieter, had more influence than I was willing to admit. Impulse, and it did not appear dramatic. It appeared reasonable. Spend this, delay that, skip this, start later. Nothing extreme, but consistent. And consistency builds outcomes. Let me ask you something carefully. How many decisions in your life feel like they belong to you? And how many feel like they simply happened? Because there is a difference. A decision carries weight, an impulse carries momentum, and momentum does not ask for permission. It moves you. The Greeks did not trust momentum, they trained against it. Because a man moved by impulse is not in control, he is being carried, and anything that carries you can drop you. I decided to test something extreme, not a small adjustment, not a gradual improvement, a complete restriction. For 7 days, I would remove as much unnecessary choice as possible. Every action would be deliberate. Every decision would be questioned. Every impulse would be resisted, not suppressed blindly, examined, and then either allowed or denied. At first it felt excessive, almost theatrical. Why would anyone live like this? But that question revealed something uncomfortable. I had never truly tested the limits of my own control. I had assumed it existed, without proof. The first day was not productive. It was confrontational. Every small action became a point of friction. Reaching for my phone, opening something without purpose, making a quick decision to avoid thinking, all of it became visible. And visibility creates tension. Because once you see something clearly, you cannot pretend it isn't there. Let me ask you something directly. What do you do when no one is watching, and no result is immediately at stake? Because that is where control lives, or disappears. By the second day, the resistance intensified, not externally, internally. There was a constant negotiation. Had just this once. Not a big deal. You've already done enough. The voice was calm, logical, convincing, and that is what made it dangerous. Because it did not feel like weakness, it felt like reason. The Greeks warned about this. They did not fear chaos, they feared persuasion. Because the most dangerous loss of control is the one that feels justified. Let me ask you something. How many times have you convinced yourself to lower your own standard? Not because you had to, but because it felt acceptable. By the third day, something shifted, not in behavior, in awareness. I began to notice how quickly impulses appeared, how frequently they interrupted thought, how easily they redirected action, and I realized something unsettling. Much of what I called my decisions were simply responses to impulses I had never questioned. That realization carried weight, because if your decisions are not fully yours, then neither are your outcomes. The Greeks built their philosophy on this distinction. What is within your control? What is not? And they treated that boundary as sacred. But modern life blurs it. It convinces you that everything is flexible, that standards can adjust, that discipline can negotiate, and slowly, your structure weakens. Let me ask you something carefully. Where in your life have you replaced discipline with flexibility, without admitting it, because flexibility without structure becomes erosion. By the fourth day, the experiment became heavier, not physically, mentally. There was no escape. Every action required presence, no autopilot, no shortcuts, no unconscious decisions. And that created fatigue, not from effort, from awareness. Because awareness demands energy. The Greeks understood this. They did not aim to control everything, only what mattered. Because control applied everywhere becomes exhaustion. But control applied precisely becomes power. Let me ask you something. Are you trying to control everything? Or are you controlling the right things? Because those are not the same. By the fifth day, something unexpected happened. The impulses did not disappear, but they lost strength. Not because they were weaker, but because they were no longer believed. And belief is what gives impulse its authority. Without belief, it becomes noise, and noise can be ignored. And this is where discipline begins to change form. It is no longer resistance. It becomes selection, choosing what deserves action and what does not. The Greeks valued this deeply, because selection is what creates structure. Let me ask you something directly. If you removed half of your daily actions, which ones would truly matter? Because most people are not overwhelmed by responsibility. They are overwhelmed by unnecessary action. By the sixth day, something became clear. My life had not been lacking discipline. It had been lacking boundaries between impulse and action, between thought and behavior, between intention and execution. And without boundaries, everything blends together. Decisions become reactions, actions lose direction, and outcomes feel unpredictable. The Greeks did not allow this. They created clear divisions between what is chosen and what is rejected. Let me ask you something carefully. What in your life have you allowed to continue, simply because you never decided to stop it? Because absence of decision is still a decision. By the seventh day, the experiment reached its conclusion, but something had already shifted. Not dramatically, but fundamentally. My finances had not exploded, they had stabilized. Spending reduced, not through restriction, through awareness. Decisions aligned, not through effort, through clarity. And something else appeared: space, the absence of unnecessary movement, the removal of friction, the presence of structure. This is what the Greeks pursued. Not wealth alone, but the ability to sustain it, because wealth without control is temporary. Awe and control is built through discipline. Not comfortable discipline, radical discipline. The kind that questions everything. The kind that refuses convenience. The kind that builds arete. Let me ask you one final question. If every impulse you acted on today was examined closely, would your life look like it was designed, or like it was carried? Because in the end, your life is not shaped by what you intend. It is shaped by what you allow. And as Epictetus wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself."